Welcome to Screen Hollywood, the home of movie news and entertainment. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
And this is where I give the movie credit. After 5 previous films, you'd expect Insidious to have run out of ideas, but this film at least attempts to expand the mythology. The problem is that the movie doesn't always take advantage of that opportunity as effectively as I would have liked. Some modern horror films can become so obsessed with mythology, symbolism, and complicated timelines that you need a PowerPoint presentation afterwards. Out of the Further doesn't really have that problem, and there are plenty of those quirky, insidious jump scares that fans of the franchise have come to expect. And the emotional side of the story works. There is genuine tension surrounding the relationship between Gemma and her daughter. That gives the supernatural elements something to latch onto. It still relies heavily on the traditional Insidious formula. Well, I've seen the latest installment in the Insidious franchise, Insidious Out of the Further, and this is now the 6th movie in the series. 6! At this point, The Further practically needs its own postcode. And after watching this one, I've got to say, I thought it was okay. Not terrible, not brilliant. There are some genuinely creepy moments in here, some decent scares, some strong performances, but I walked out of the cinema thinking that Insidious is beginning to show its age. And that's not necessarily because this is a bad movie. It's because horror has changed dramatically since the original Insidious arrived in 2010, and the competition has become brutal. So today we're going to talk about what Insidious Out of the Further actually brings to the franchise, why I think its central idea is genuinely interesting, where the film works, where it doesn't, and whether 6 movies into this franchise, Insidious still has what it takes to scare us. And don't worry, I'm keeping this review spoiler-free. So let's start with the basic premise. This time, we're not following the Lambert family. Instead, the movie introduces us to Gemma, played by Amelia Eve. Gemma is a young mother who lives with her daughter in the house where she grew up. And immediately, there's something unusual about Gemma. She has a connection to the Further. Now, if you're familiar with the Insidious franchise, you'll know that the Further is essentially a supernatural realm inhabited by lost souls and some extremely unpleasant entities. It's been at the center of this franchise since the beginning. Normally, the danger comes from people entering the Further, but this movie flips that idea. Gemma discovers that she can not only travel into the Further, she can bring things back with her. And that changes the entire equation. She's essentially what the movie calls a carrier. And once the entities realize what Gemma can do, they become very interested in her. Because suddenly, the Further isn't just a place humans can accidentally enter, it's a doorway into our world. And that is probably the most interesting concept this franchise has introduced in years. And this is where I give the movie credit. After 5 previous films, you'd expect Insidious to have run out of ideas. But this film at least attempts to expand the mythology. The original Insidious was built around the idea of astral projection, and people traveling into this mysterious, supernatural dimension. Out of the Further essentially asks, what happens if the traffic starts going the other way? What happens when the things living in that world discover they can come here? That's a pretty good horror concept, and it gives the filmmakers an opportunity to create something different. The problem is that the movie doesn't always take advantage of that opportunity as effectively as I would have liked. Let's get to the big question. Is Insidious Out of the Further scary? Yes, sometimes. There are definitely creepy moments, there are some effective sequences, and there are plenty of those quirky, insidious jump scares that fans of the franchise have come to expect. You know the ones. Everything is quiet, nothing is happening, you're waiting, and then, bang! Something appears. And yes, a few of them got me. I'm not going to sit here pretending I didn't jump. But here's my problem. After 6 movies, you can see them coming. And that's a problem for a horror movie. The original Insidious had this ability to make you feel genuinely uncomfortable because you didn't know what was around the corner. This time, I found myself occasionally thinking, okay, something's about to appear. And then, there it was. And I want to make something clear. The story itself is actually pretty straightforward. And I think that's one of the strengths of the movie. You're never sitting there wondering what the hell is going on. The film knows what it wants to tell you. Gemma has this supernatural ability. She has a connection to the Further. Her daughter is in danger. The entities want access to our world, and Gemma has to figure out how to stop them. Simple, concise, easy to follow. And honestly, that's refreshing. Some modern horror films can become so obsessed with mythology, symbolism, and complicated timelines that you need a PowerPoint presentation afterwards. Out of the Further doesn't really have that problem. It gets on with it. One thing I wasn't expecting was how much I enjoyed the performances. Amelia Eve does a good job as Gemma, and considering this is largely a new cast for the franchise, there was a lot riding on her shoulders. She's playing a mother who's dealing with something absolutely terrifying while also trying to protect her daughter. And the emotional side of the story works. There is genuine tension surrounding the relationship between Gemma and her daughter. That gives the supernatural elements something to latch onto. Because ultimately, a horror movie only works if we care about the people being terrorized. And I did care. This is where my opinion becomes a little more critical. Because horror has evolved. A lot. When the first Insidious came out in 2010, the franchise had a very distinctive identity. The Further was creepy. The red-faced demon was iconic. The sound design was unsettling. The imagery was memorable. And James Wan and Leigh Whannell were doing something that felt fresh. But it's now 2026. We've had backrooms. We've had weapons. We've had films experimenting with atmosphere, psychological horror, surrealism, folklore, and genuinely disturbing concepts. And even this year, we've seen movies that have pushed the horror genre in some very interesting directions. So when you put Insidious, Out of the Further, next to some of the newer horror that's coming out, it feels a little old-fashioned. Not necessarily bad, just familiar. This is the biggest criticism I have of the film. I've seen these ingredients before. The creepy house, the strange noises, the unexplained movement, the shadowy figure, the sudden appearance, the distorted face, the supernatural entity, the character walking into a dark room when you are screaming at the screen, "Don't go in there!" It's all here. And while the movie does introduce the interesting concept of entities being able to cross into our world, it still relies heavily on the traditional Insidious formula. And that's where I think the franchise is starting to run into trouble, because horror audiences have become more sophisticated. We've seen filmmakers experiment. We've seen them manipulate perspective. We've seen unconventional storytelling. We've seen horror mixed with drama, comedy, psychological thrillers, and even science fiction. The genre is moving forward, and Insidious sometimes feels like it's standing still. Now, I don't want this review to sound like I'm completely trashing the movie. I'm not. Technically, it's a solid production. The cinematography works. The atmosphere is good. The performances are convincing. The story moves along at a decent pace, and there are some genuinely nail-biting sequences. This isn't some disaster. It's a perfectly competent horror movie, and I think that's why I'm giving it 3 out of 5. Because I enjoyed watching it. I just don't think it pushed the genre forward. There's another thing that slightly bothered me. Some of the supernatural creatures and apparitions are actually quite strange, and not necessarily in a frightening way. There were moments where I found myself looking at something and thinking, that's supposed to scare me? Some of the imagery borders on theatrical, and that creates a strange contrast, because the movie is trying to be serious. It's dealing with motherhood, trauma, grief, fear, and the consequences of being connected to this supernatural world. But then you'll occasionally get an entity that looks almost cartoonish, and it can take you out of the moment. I also think the movie loses some of its fear factor towards the end. The first part does a good job establishing the mystery. The middle section builds the tension. But once everything starts coming together, the horror becomes more conventional, and I found myself less frightened. The film starts with some interesting ideas about the boundary between the Further and our world, but by the final third, it feels much more like a conventional Insidious movie. And I think that's a missed opportunity, because the premise actually gives them permission to do something much more ambitious. Now here's the interesting thing. Despite my criticisms, people are still turning up. Insidious, Out of the Further, has opened strongly, taking the top spot domestically on Friday according to early box office reporting, although Spider-Man, Brand New Day, is still expected to win the full weekend. And that tells you something about the power of this franchise. People know what they're getting. They know what Insidious means. They know they're going to get ghosts. They know they're going to get demons. They know they're going to get jump scares. And they know they're going back into the Further. It's become a reliable horror brand. and Hollywood loves reliable brands. One thing I genuinely don't understand: why release this in August? If there's one franchise that practically screams October, it's Insidious. Imagine this movie releasing in the middle of October. Cold nights, Halloween decorations everywhere, people looking for horror movies. The atmosphere is already there. Instead, we've got Insidious arriving in the middle of August. And I'm not saying the movie won't make money. Clearly, it's already showing commercial strength. But I genuinely think the Halloween season could have given this film an even bigger cultural moment. Let's be realistic. Probably. If a franchise continues making money, Hollywood isn't going to close the door. And Insidious is exactly the type of property studios like. It doesn't require a gigantic blockbuster budget. It has an established audience. The mythology can be expanded. And The Further gives them an almost unlimited supply of supernatural creatures and stories. So I wouldn't be remotely surprised if we see another one. But if they do, I want something different. We've had 6 films. The next movie needs to give us another reason to be scared, not just another reason to jump. And that's really my biggest takeaway from this movie. Insidious, Out of the Further, isn't bad. But horror has become much more ambitious. The bar has been raised. Audiences are now being exposed to filmmakers who aren't satisfied with simply putting a monster behind the camera and making us jump. They're creating worlds. They're playing with psychology. They're creating dread. They're experimenting with structure. And they're finding new ways to make audiences uncomfortable. That's what Insidious needs to start doing again. Because the original had that quality. It felt different. It felt dangerous. It felt like something we'd never really seen before. And I want that feeling back. So, Insidious, Out of the Further. Did I enjoy it? Yes. Did I think it was scary? At times. Did it have some good jump scares? Absolutely. Did I enjoy the performances? Yes. Is the carrier concept interesting? Definitely. But did I think it was one of the best horror movies I've seen? No, not even close. The film is entertaining, it's creepy, it's well made, and it's certainly a worthy addition to the franchise. But after 6 movies, I think Insidious is starting to feel dated. The horror genre has evolved tremendously, and if this franchise wants to continue competing with the new generation of horror filmmakers, it's going to need to evolve with it. For me, 3 out of 5. And I'm genuinely curious to know what you think. Did you go to see Insidious, Out of the Further? Did it scare you? Do you think the franchise is still delivering? Or has The Further finally started running out of steam? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this review, make sure you like, subscribe to Screen Hollywood, and turn on notifications for more movie reviews, horror reviews, trailer breakdowns, Hollywood news, and box office analysis. And bookmark and subscribe to our international new publication at screenhollywood.com. This is Screen Hollywood, Beyond the Headlines.